Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Cotter, and I will be serving as the moderator for tonight's Candidates Forum. I'm joined by two distinguished panelists, former Mayor Jordan Glatt and former Councilman at Large and Council President Frank Masiosi. During the next 90 minutes or so, each candidate will be introduced momentarily, and they'll have an opportunity to respond to questions posed by our two panelists. The candidates have not seen the questions, which were selected by the panelists and moderator from more than 100 that were emailed for consideration. Summit indeed has an engaged electorate. The overall process and rules for this evening's debate have been shared with each party and all of the candidates. The rules are intended to reinforce decorum. That's a word that might seem old-fashioned, but decorum is really about order and respectfulness for the process and, importantly, for one another. So here are the rules. Please, no audience questions, interruptions, or disruptions of any kind. Please also refrain from any applause, with two exceptions that I'll mention in just a moment. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to make an opening statement, and after questions have been responded to, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. The order of the candidates' responses during the closing statement and opening statement were determined at random. The panelists will alternate when posing questions to each candidate. Candidates will have 90 seconds to respond to each question. Each candidate will have an opportunity to make a 30-second rebuttal on that question if they so desire. The candidate asked first will be different for each question, and some of the questions may not be asked of all of the candidates. We have a timekeeper. Thank you, Amanda. And she has a clock that will be visible to the candidates and to me. If the candidate does not see that the allotted time has expired, I will note that the time is up. Campaign literature is not to be distributed during the debates, but it may be left for the audience on a table outside of this meeting room. During the debate, candidates will not have cell phones or other electronic devices with them. There will be no recording of tonight's event, with the exception that the debate is being sponsored and filmed by Hometown TV. It will be aired without being edited for content within several days of tonight's event. To the extent that something may emerge that is not covered in the rules, the moderator will be the final arbiter of all disputes. Our candidates are, for Mayor, Dr. Elizabeth Fagan, Mr. David Nadeau. For Council at Large, Mr. Kevin Smallwood and Dr. Jamie Levine. For Ward 1 Council Member, Bob Pawlowski and Diego Hoyk. For Ward 2 Council Member, Jamel Boyer and Claire Toth. Serving as an elected official has never been easy, and in recent years it certainly hasn't become any easier. Fulfilling the role as a member of Summit's governing body requires an uncommon commitment of time and energy. It is unpaid and often thankless, but it does offer something especially valuable: the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of members of this community, our community. And as community members, we should be especially grateful when fellow citizens step forward as candidates for elected office. At the outset of this evening's forum, I would ask that you please join me in expressing our appreciation to all the candidates with a round of applause. So thank you. That was the first exception to the applause rule. The second exception will happen at the end of tonight's event. So we'll begin, and each candidate will have the opportunity for an opening statement limited to 2 minutes in length. The order of these statements that they'll be presented in was selected randomly. And so, the first is, I'm sorry, thank you. The first will be presented by Mr. Pulowski.
On September 14th, 1837, the first train crawled over the hill. The train timetable referred to the stop on the hill as Summit. It is likely that the settlement was named after the train schedule, the highest point on the train line. That's a quote from Edmund Raft's History of Summit, and it's a great reminder that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And the giants who came before us left us something special. We all live here because Summit is so very special, and I aim to keep it that way. My name's Bob Pulowski, and I'm running for Common Council in Ward 1. I've called Summit home for 40 years now. The sense of community that I've experienced and our collective pride in the Hill City have enriched my life. Summit is as much a part of me as I am of her. I've been troubled by Summit's direction in recent times, so I spoke up. I said things like, we can't just stand by as Summit marches on a path of unnecessary and unwanted overdevelopment like Broad Street West. We can't stand by as we fall victim to home invasions where intruders steal not only our property, but also our peace of mind. And we can't accept opaque explanations and non-answers to the questions important to us from our elected officials. Not anymore. So I'm done just speaking up. I'm standing up for Summit and every one of its residents. We need to get back to a Summit where we see each other not as Democrats or Republicans, but as neighbors, friends, and family. A safer Summit we and our children can enjoy without worry. And a Summit where elected officials are trusted because they deal in truth and transparency and have the humility to accept accountability when things don't go as planned. Half of the individuals on this stage will be centrally involved in the 2026 Master Plan reexamination. I aspire to a master plan committed to maintaining the charm and character of our wonderful town as a suburb, sprawling, green, and with responsible development that enhances Summit without burdening its residents. We can accomplish all of this together for Summit.
The next presentation, opening remarks, will be by Mr. Hoyk.
Good evening. I'm pleased to be here. I want to thank all the neighbors who came out today or those who are watching on television. I also want to thank everybody who asked questions. And I also want to thank Chris, Jordan, and Frank for the invaluable service you're providing us. I am Diego Hoyt. I'm running for the Ward 1 Council seat. This is the first time in my life to run for office. I got involved in local politics because I became concerned about how we, 22,000 neighbors living inside 6 square miles, resolve our differences. To me, assertive but civil dialogue is the very essence of community, and this is why I have made it a hallmark of my campaign. Before we get into details, let me tell you a bit about myself and my qualifications to represent my neighbors on our common council. My wife Amalia and I moved to Summit 4 years ago because we love this safe, diverse, and welcoming community. We wanted our 3 boys to attend our excellent public schools. They go to Lincoln Hubbard, where I have volunteered as PTO treasurer for the last 3 years. As for my education, I completed undergraduate studies at Columbia University in New York, and I then earned a PhD in organic chemistry from MIT and an MBA in accounting and finance from NYU Stern. I began work as a scientist, and I earned my American citizenship because of contributions to our country. Valuable research papers, inventions, successful new products. As my career progressed, I learned to make complex bureaucracies nimbler and more innovative, which led to becoming an entrepreneur 6 years ago when I started my innovation consulting firm. I help clients grow sales and profit by effectively cutting through red tape. I've also served on several corporate boards and invaluable preparation to serve on our Common Council. I will work hard to bring people together around common sense solutions to make our government more effective and efficient and to keep Summit the best little city in America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyt. We now have Dr. Levine.
Good. Thank you to our moderators, and thank you to all of you and everyone at home watching tonight. I am Dr. Jamie Levine, and for the past 11 months, I've had the privilege of serving as your councilperson at large, and I have so enjoyed working on behalf of all of you. In these past 11 months, I'm so proud of how much I've accomplished and the relationships I've built in that relatively short period of time. Tonight, you will see how I approach a problem, and you will hear about my accomplishments. And I think you will see that I am good at my job. I grew up in Springfield, just down the road from Summit. I attended Duke University, where I competed on the track and field team. I then returned to New Jersey for medical school. And I spent my professional career taking care of people who survived brain injury. And I recently took a step back to focus on giving back to my community. I've always looked for ways to serve and always raise my hand any chance I get. A few examples of my service in Summit include serving on our zoning board, serving on the board of trustees of the Reeves-Reed Arboretum, where I chaired the accessibility committee, to name a few. One of the interesting things I've found about switching from medicine to governance is how similar the two actually are and how one really prepared me for the other. With medicine, I would listen, build trust, and then craft a unique plan for that individual, because that individual is unlike anyone else. And here, what I'm doing on council is I'm looking at a problem, I'm thinking, doing a very critical analysis, and then collaboratively crafting a solution that is right for Summit, because Summit is unlike any place else. I'm looking forward to answering your questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. The next candidate is David Nadeau.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here. When we first moved to Summit 20 years ago, I started volunteering on the Environmental Commission. I was then appointed and reappointed to the Planning Board by both Democratic and Republican mayors. I served on council for 6 years, 2 of them as council president. I co-founded the Summit Conservancy, which raised the money for and built a free market building at the transfer station. The role of the mayor includes being the chief spokesperson for the town, to work with volunteer organizations, and to serve as the point person for reaching out to the county, the state, or DC. I believe that with my past experience, I can hit the ground running. While I was on council, we worked to increase pedestrian safety. We added 4-way stops, speed humps, and created a sidewalk master plan. I also worked with the police department and received a commendation for them for my support of their mission. During the pandemic, I was involved in helping local businesses, keeping city services functioning, and turning the community center into a vaccination hub. This work has made Summit stronger. And I'm extremely proud that Summit finally began free full-day kindergarten, something our educators pushed for, something we knew then, and has proven to be now beneficial to our students, families, and property values. My record is clear and consistent on our schools. And as mayor, I would strengthen what we have and avoid the politicization that is occurring in towns all around us. Let me also directly address Broad Street West. The project is dead. The idea of developing this area existed much before I got onto council. The idea was supported both by Republicans and Democrats and by the public through the master plan process. But as I've said many times, the public, you, will ultimately decide what happens. And last year, the public spoke up. And even when I was off council, residents from all sides reached out to me because they believed that I would listen and try to communicate their concerns to council. I look forward to discussing these issues with you. Thank you.
Thank you. The next candidate is Dr. Fagan.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Awesome. Okay. It's an honor to be here tonight. I never thought I'd be standing here. In fact, I've adamantly said no when asked to run for council over the years. When I moved to Summit 22 years ago to start my residency at Overlook, I had no idea how much I would love this town. But now, I know there's no place like it. I was fortunate enough to practice medicine in and around Summit for the past 20 plus years until I retired last November. I'm also the mother of 4 children, all who have attended or are attending Summit Public Schools. If you want proof for my passion about this town, you could just look at my active engagement for the past 2 decades. Many of you in this room know me as a volunteer and/or as a medical doctor. My family is involved in this community and always has been. My husband has run the youth football program for 9 years and has coached for about 15. I have volunteered for over 12 organizations in this town. I lead by listening. Just ask the people who have served on boards with me. It has always been about Summit, our neighbors, and what's best for them, our friends, our children, and our families, especially those in need. Tonight, we will talk about things that are important to you, things I hear as I knock on doors and attend campaign events. Repeatedly, I have heard concerns about safety and quality of life, education, school rankings declining, preserving our small town character and charm, and transparency. People ask, why are the public comments at the end of the Common Council meetings? How did Broad Street West get so far with so many opposed it? As you listen tonight, please consider what kind of leader you are looking for. Do you feel better off in Summit than you did 5 years ago? What do you see for Summit in the next 5 years? And what are the characteristics you are looking for in your next mayor? Thank you all for being here, taking time out of your busy schedules. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Mr. Smallwood.
Good evening. Testing. Hello? Of course, I'm the one that ends up with the mic.
And the clock is running.
And the clock is running. Now I got to speak really fast. First of all, thank you all very much for being here. My name is Kevin Smo, and I'm running for Common Council at large. This is one of the most important parts of our democracy, and that's to discuss critical issues that shape our community's future: safety, education, and fiscal responsibility. Our families should feel secure in their homes. It's crucial that we work together with our law enforcement and community organizations to ensure the safety of every resident. With a focus on community policing, making Summit an even safer place to raise our families. Summit's education is the crown jewel of our children's future. Our schools must prepare our students not only academically, but also for the challenges of the modern world. We must ensure that every child in Summit receives the education that they deserve. Fiscal responsibility is essential. We need to manage our finances prudently, ensuring that every taxpayer's hard-earned money is spent wisely. I will prioritize transparency and accountability and actively seek opportunities to reduce wasteful spending and maintaining essential services. But achieving these goals, it takes a community working together for Summit. I urge you all to get involved, share your ideas, and hold us accountable. Together, we can make Summit an even better place to live, work, and raise a family. Summit, New Jersey is a community that thrives on its strong sense of unity and shared values. Let's reaffirm our commitment to safety, education, and fiscal responsibility, and together we can ensure a brighter future for this wonderful town we all call home. Thank you, and let's embark on this journey together for Summit.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Claire Toth.
Thank you, Chris. Moderators,
thanks to all of you. Maya Angelou said, "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time." My professional and volunteer experience has consistently shown you that I am about community, collaboration, and competence. In my work on the boards of the Summit Educational Foundation and Sage Elder Care, along with my service on the Family Promise Finance Committee, I've demonstrated my commitment to the most vulnerable members of our community. In my work on the Historic Preservation Commission and the Zoning Board, I've strengthened the built community by advocating for our historic character, smart development, and creative ways to meet our affordable housing obligation. As treasurer of Summit Downtown Incorporated, I collaborated with the Summit Foundation and Summit residents during the pandemic to raise $700,000 to keep our local businesses open and help them reopen safely during the pandemic. SDI also collaborated with the city, stringing lights throughout downtown and providing the live music that created the party atmosphere that helped us all get through the pandemic. This led directly to Summit's downtown being ranked as one of the best in the state, with a 99% store occupancy rate and certification from the National Main Street Organization. No small feat during a global emergency. In my day job, running financial planning for an area bank, I've demonstrated my competence by hiring and training my team from scratch, developing the processes and products to fulfill our mission, selling them internally and externally, and creating an education campaign. My work has been recognized. The Boy Scouts, the Suburban Chambers of Commerce, and NJ Biz have all honored me for my professional and community accomplishments. I'd like to take this and work for all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And our final candidate, Mr. Jamel Boyer.
Community isn't just a buzzword for me. It's about conviction and commitment. Let me explain. You see, I moved to Summit when I was the same age as my daughter, 10 years old, from Newark, New Jersey. Single parent household, struggling mother. We lived on Dennis Place. This town has brought to me everything that I hold dear. I met my wife at a 5th grade pool party. I went to all the Summit school systems, Washington School, middle school. We both graduated high school together in 1996, and now we have 2 beautiful children. My daughter, I mentioned, she's at Brayton. My son is a freshman in high school. So when you think about why I'm running, it's simple. It's because if it wasn't for this town, I wouldn't have everything that I hold dear in my life. So when you talk about commitment and when you talk about conviction, I have it, and I'm ready to serve you. Now, when you look at my qualifications, I'm a former narcotics detective, so I can really help out when it comes to law enforcement. And I'm no slouch when it comes to education either. I have a criminal justice degree, an MBA, and a master's in accounting. So I can do fiscal responsibility and also, like I said, law enforcement. I think that I have the unique qualities to help serve this environment, this neighborhood, and to give back to a community that has given me so much. Thank you.
Thank you to all the candidates. Now for the questions. The first question will go to the candidates for mayor and will be asked by Jordan Glatt. And the first question will be responded to by Mr. Naidu.
Good evening. I too would be remiss if I didn't thank all the candidates. Not only do I know what you're going through tonight, I know if you win what you'll be going through. So, I just want to also thank all the candidates. As I was saying, is not only do I know what they're all going through tonight, I also know if they should win what they'd be going through. So, anyway. Mr. Nadeau, providing affordable housing has not only been a goal of previous councils, but is a court order obligation that the city has. What is your vision of how the city should handle this need and obligation?
Thank you, Jordan, for that question. Oh. Okay. Hello? I'll just come. Just do that.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, that's okay. Elizabeth, really? Really? Yes, exactly. Affordable housing. It's a court order that we have. Let's just take a step back. When I was on council, when Mike McTiernan was council president, we negotiated at that time the city with fair share housing, our affordable housing obligations. And we have a responsibility, and both legal responsibility as well as a moral responsibility to try in good faith to get to 50 units of affordable housing in this town. We have made very little progress really since that period of time towards that goal. We already had some units in line, and now we have to get to the rest. We have 3 years to achieve that. In order for us to get to our affordable housing needs, we have to figure out how to get development done. Broad Street is dead. That's not going to happen. But in that area where now the old fire station is going to be, we're going to have to do some kind of development. And that will help towards that affordable housing need. And then we'll have to look at what other areas of town there are to get to there. Because the worst case scenario, what people should recognize, the risks that we are running, is that if we don't meet our affordable housing needs, there's something called a builder's remedy. And that means that the court goes ahead and allows a builder to take any area, regardless of its zoning, and be allowed to put a large monstrosity of a building in order to achieve our affordable housing needs. So this is a significant issue that we need to address, and we need to take it seriously.
Thank you. Dr. Fagan.
Thank you. So my understanding is Broad Street West is not dead yet. The ordinance has been introduced to repeal the redevelopment plan at the council meeting. But there's also a blight designation that we need to remove. And once we do that, then and only then will Broad Street West be dead. So once that happens, that's an opportunity for us to actually address affordable housing. We could put in place an overlay zone. It's something that would allow developers an opportunity to develop affordable housing. And this is something that has been effectively done and has been used to create affordable housing throughout Summit already. So this is something, there's a lot of land there, and it will need to be developed, and this would be an opportunity. And also, I want to clarify, the agreement states that we need to make reasonable efforts to facilitate construction of 50 units by 2025. And we've got 25 already done, and potentially an attorney, like my opponent, could potentially come in and explain that we are well on our way as long as we create an overlay zone. So I would like to end with that.
Thank you. Would either candidate care to provide a rebuttal?
Sure. Let me first deal with the issue of the having what's called a blighted designation, which is called, you'll hear the term ANOR, area in need of redevelopment. So let's just deal with that first. That issue is, this is a 9-year-long process that we've gotten here to. Unwinding any type of legal agreements, as my opponent just said, I'm a lawyer, I understand unwinding agreements will take some time. We will get there, it needs to be done, and once that is done, it will come to its natural conclusion.
Thank you. And Dr. Fagan?
My strong feeling is that the only way to really follow through on what the council has promised to the residents is to remove that blight designation. And once we do that, that would allow us to make that property available, and actually more available for something like affordable housing. And that would help us get on our way much more quickly to satisfying that requirement.
Thank you. The next question will be posed to all 8 candidates. And we'll begin with Claire Toth and work our way this way. So from my left to right, your right to your left. And that question will be posed by Frank Messiosi.
It is no secret that the Broad Street development project became a contentious issue within the community. At this point, one could say that the proposed project is off the table. What is your vision for the future of the property, and how would you have handled it differently? In your response, please include your view on whether the area in need of redevelopment designation should remain.
90 seconds. I could go till next week. When Broad Street West began being redeveloped prior to the pandemic, there was a great deal of community engagement, and I participated in it. I really wish that post-pandemic that had been restarted. A great deal of Summit changed during the pandemic. There were new voices, there were new needs, there were new thoughts. So I think that was one big mistake, that there should have been more post-pandemic engagement. When I saw the 10-pound building in the 5-pound bag, my first reaction was that the developers had taken every suggestion from that prior community engagement and put it in a single building rather than spread it across what was still 4 different pieces of property. So yes, I too am glad that as that was proposed, that's not going to happen. I believe we're going to get rid of the area in need of redevelopment designation. Our bipartisan council, working with its attorney, is doing this step by step deliberately. As to what should be there, it should be zoned as housing. I can't tell you what it should look like, but it should feel like a neighborhood. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy that Claire and I are in agreement that the area needed redevelopment needs to be removed. But the problem is it hasn't been, and it's taking so long for that even to happen. The fact is that our community is behind the 8 ball because of this situation. Summit is lagging based on other towns. I mean, look at our downtown. We lack entertainment. We lack a lot of different mixed restaurants. And think about what could have happened, and think about who was responsible for that. We could have given a developer $30 million, no payments to our school systems, and Summit would have been left holding a bag of $3 million if that would have went through. The fact is, Summit, unlike other towns, didn't need a pilot. We are a AAA rated town. So why go down that road? Now, we could spend a lot of time talking about that and why that happened. Some of us know, some of us don't know, but I will educate some residents tonight about that. And this is all online, you can look it up. But now what I would do, remove the area in need of redevelopment, use our overlay zones to build affordable housing, and why not 100% affordable housing? Why have 140 units and have 10 of them affordable and try to call them affordable housing? Smoke and mirrors.
Thank you. So I watched the Broad Street West redevelopment project unfold as a member of the community like all of us did. And as an observer, there were aspects to the proposal that concerned me. And then when I joined council, I realized right away that those concerns I had were yet to be resolved. And I soon gleaned that there was no viable path forward for us as a city with this developer. And I voted in a unanimous bipartisan vote first to sever ties with the developer, and then next to repeal the redevelopment plan in its entirety. Actions speak louder than words. So I don't need to say what I would do. I can say what I did. Now, I think the next logical step in continuing to disentangle ourselves from this is to repeal the designation as an area in need of redevelopment. Now, the last part of the question is, what would I like to do with the land? Well, we really need affordable housing for many reasons. I would love to see some aspect of affordable housing, and senior housing is a big need in our community. Also, when I first heard about the Broad Street West project, I heard that a movie theater would once again grace our city. I wonder if it's possible to have a movie theater there too. Thank you.
And my clock is still going. So when it comes to Broad Street West, in 2014, I was chairman of Summit Downtown Inc. And David approached me along with others when he was on the planning board and the zoning board. He was on the planning board. This has been Mr. Naidu's vision since 2014. He approached me to ask me, do you think it would be possible to include or expand the Special Improvement District to Broad Street West? My question was, what is Broad Street West? And he explained to me that we will need a new fire station to build it up to code. And we're going to redevelop that area and make Broad Street a whole redevelopment area with retail and apartments on above. This has been a vision for 9 years. And if this is something where actions speak louder than words, then why didn't we remove the blighted designation at the same time that we removed the redevelopment designation? We are not a blighted, there is no part in town in Summit that is blighted. This designation was meant for towns in parts of Jersey City, parts of Hoboken, parts of Harrison, outside of Newark, where they needed to entice developers to come in and invest in their towns. We don't need to entice developers to come into our town. We have a wonderful town that investors were willing to come into our town without having a 30-year tax abatement.
Thank you.
So let me just set the record straight here with Kevin's interesting anecdote here about myself. In 2014, I was on the planning board. However, at that time, we had a Republican mayor and an all-Republican council. I could not do anything. When the area in need of redevelopment was started, it was started by Ellen Dixon and an all-Republican council. So maybe you should ask them why they thought that this area was blighted. Second, with respect to the ANOR right now, as I've said before, I am in favor of removing it. But however, I'm going to tell you, because people should be honest with the public, there are legal risks if we do not do it. It may be politically expedient for people to say, let's just remove it. But you, the taxpayers, will bear that legal risk. I don't think that's fair. That's not governance. That's not taking things seriously. That is just placating people. Third, with respect to how Broad Street was handled after I left council. When I left council, this was a proposal, and then it was presented. When it was presented, there were people who were upset by it. People who were opposed to this project reached out to me. They asked me to reach out to council, to work, and that's what I did. I tried to find compromises, and I tried to find people to communicate with each other. Finally, I think we need, and I think we all probably agree, that we need a smaller scale building that will have residential housing and some commercial development. That's what the master plan called for anyway.
So, interestingly, though my opponent likes to say that he's against this now, on the June 15th, 2022 council meeting, he implored council to continue, despite 7 months and thousands of residents opposing a 140-unit building in our downtown. So let's be clear about that. My vision for what Broad Street West should look like is what all of you would want it to look like. It's something, we need to collaborate on this. I think we do need to do some affordable housing in this town. Does it need to be there? Perhaps, but I think we need to get some input and community engagement. How I would have handled it differently, I would have waited to relocate the firehouse onto parking spots that were worth about $400,000 of annual income to the city. I would have waited to build a $17 million firehouse before we struck a deal with a developer to partially pay for that. What I'd love to see there is maybe some green space, something with ample parking, maybe senior housing, maybe an amphitheater, some outdoor entertainment space. I don't know, maybe a movie theater. I love Jamie's idea. But what's most important about this is Summit does things right when we do it together.
Hello. Okay. So thank you for the question. I love it. It's actually about the future of that property, and I think it's great. So about the A&R designation, I am in favor of removing it if we can do it in a manner where we do our homework and we listen to our legal counsel and follow a proper procedure to ensure that we minimize the risk to our tax-paying base of having to face a builder's remedy lawsuit. Those threats are real. The cities that ignore the very aggressive developers in New Jersey, which have been given a sledgehammer by our state Supreme Court, the cities that ignore them get monstrosities built, like what's happening now in Chatham, and like what's happening right now in Melbourne. It's happening in Princeton, it's happening all over the state in wealthy communities. We need to take this risk seriously and follow the right process, follow our legal counsel's advice, and not rush into things simply because it's politically expedient. In terms of what goes into the property next, I think that some of the other candidates have mentioned some of the options that I would like to see. I do not like affordable housing per se because it leads to ghettoization. So I'd rather see some sort of a mixed building that has affordable housing and market rate housing. And if we could have a 55-plus building, I think that would add a lot of value without impacting necessarily our schools too much. So I think we need to agree at the outset as a community on what we're going to build there. There's ideas. Let's do it right. Thank you.
I guess I'm cleaning up here. Well, I'll start with, I'd like to see some kind of an overlay zone with mixed use, including some affordable housing. I think that all of this builder's remedy talk is fear-mongering. Anybody who's read the settlement agreement knows what it says. We're not required to get 50 units. We're required to use reasonable efforts, not even best efforts, but reasonable efforts in order to facilitate the construction of additional affordable housing units. That being said, I think we can have, like Jamel said, all affordable housing in that area. You asked whether I would remove the blight designation. Yes, I would immediately. I've done a lot of thinking about this, and the only reason that I can see for not immediately removing the blight designation is to keep the option open for the governing body, the council, to do whatever they want and to do it without any involvement of the public. Did you guys know that the library is blighted? City Hall is blighted, okay? We're doing a renovation at the YMCA, okay, where Ms. Toth's husband raised a lot of money for it, but it's blighted. The post office is blighted, okay? What are we doing here? Let's get rid of the blights. Let's get the zoning back in place, and let's let developers come in here. They can be creative, give us some of the affordable housing that we need, and keep it within the character of our town.
Thank you. Now, by a show of hands among the candidates, would anyone like to provide a response? Mr. Port. 30 seconds.
Kevin done messed up the mic. Okay, hold on, we're good. Now, I don't know if you all heard this, but Diego said, I don't like affordable housing. And see, this is and I'm not a politician, so I'm gonna keep it real, right? This is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. You know, you get into office and then we start talking about different things. So it's either, you know, you like affordable housing or you don't. So we need to get rid of the area redevelopment. We need to use our overlay zones and we can still meet our goals. Our agreement with Fair Share Housing, which by the way, Fair Share Housing is going to sue
Mr.
all
Porter, your time is
municipalities
up.
all over again in 2025. And the clock will reset.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Your time is up. Any other members here, candidates, would wish to provide any 30-second response?
Yep. So, number one, anybody who's seen what happens in the state of in central New Jersey as a result of the Mount Laurel decision as revised in 2015 knows that the builder's remedy lawsuit is not scaremongering. It is a real problem. And the second thing is that only an attorney or a person who would think about doing in bad faith something that we're supposed to be doing in good faith. We need to do this in good faith because otherwise the courts will see through it. So let's deal with this right and get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nadeau, 30 seconds.
Sure, thank you. I just want to also point out to folks, when I started on council, about the high 70% was residential property taxes that residents like you or me would pay towards the city budget. We're now at 82% and we're climbing. Part of what the purpose of doing this type of development and doing it not just purely affordable housing, but to have a mixed-use development that includes affordable housing, is that it helps reduce yours and my property taxes. We need to increase rateable so this way the city becomes affordable for all of us, not just affordable housing, but affordable.
Thank you. Seeing Mr. Smallwood, 30 seconds.
There we go. So in terms of reducing our taxes, we negotiate. The council has the ability to negotiate, such as Bristol Myers Squibb. They have tax negotiations being done all the time, but they don't have a tax abatement. We're willing to give up 30 years of taxes going to our school systems. That's unacceptable to me. Are you kidding me that there's going to be 28 children in a 144-unit building, 5 stories?
Thank you, Mr. Smallwood. Your time is up. Seeing no further hands, we will move on to our next question. And this will come from Jordan Klatt. And this is for all 8 candidates. In terms of responding, this time we will respond from my right to the left. Mr. Glatt.
Moving right along with question 3, crime, especially car thefts and break-ins, have been plaguing Summit for the last couple of years. What should the city be doing differently?
So I think it starts with a more pronounced police presence in our town. In 1989, Summit had nearly 20,000 residents and 53 sworn police officers. Today, we're just under 23,000, a 15% increase, but we only have 47 police officers. We used to have police officers walking the beat downtown, checking on doors at night to make sure that people had locked them, tapping on the double-parked person's door, tapping on the window of a person who's parked over a crosswalk to get them to move. A lot of our pedestrian accidents have been from people trying to avoid cars that are parked like that. Having a more pronounced police presence, pulling people over for traffic violations, it does 3 things. It helps slow people down, which makes us safer. The people who are pulled over, it helps slow people down who see them, and it helps let the people know who are coming into our town to steal from us. It tells them that maybe they should pick another town other than Summit. And there have been an increase in crime. I know my opponent's going to say that car thefts are down from the first half of 2022 to the first half of 2023, but attempts are up, and what's even scarier is that burglaries are up. We've done such a good job locking our cars and bringing in our key fobs that they're now coming into our homes to try and get them. A confrontation is inevitable, and that's what we really need to avoid. You can have my car, but stay out of my house.
So notice that my opponent spoke about 1989. It is interesting, back then in 1990, crime across all areas was either double, quadruple, or 10 times as high, according to statistics that we all saw. So what has happened since 1989 until now? Well, guess what? We have the World Wide Web, we have technology, we have computers. And the reason why crime is down in great measure since 1989 is that our police can do more with fewer people, okay? So the facts are that since 1989, crime is down significantly. There's an uptick in crime in the last couple of years, and to address that, what we need to do is behave like a board would do in a company, because that's what the council is about. I have served on boards, and the one thing that you cannot do if you're a board member is to get in the hair of the CEO and do their job for them. What we need to do is hire the right police chief, I believe we have it, and then we have to give them all the resources, like for example, funding their budget 100% like we have been doing, leveraging additional technological tools like these license plate reading cameras that are going to allow us to vector our police officers more securely to the areas where somebody comes in a stolen vehicle and they can be stolen. And there's a lot of other things that we can do with technology. I'm not against hiring additional police officers, but we have to make sure we do it as part of a plan. Thank you.
I've given this a lot of thought. I have 4 children. I need to keep them safe in my house and on the streets. So I think we do need probably to have more police officers. And I think there was an ordinance discussed and something that they did in Chatham, which I think we should consider, which is to make punishments for those committing crimes while trespassing, have the punishment be a little bit more severe. That brings the ability for our police to actually act upon an arrest as opposed to leaving it at the state level. So we could actually take care of these criminals as they come into our town. The other thing I think we could do, and as your mayor, I would have relationships outside of Summit, and I think that we could work with other towns, surrounding towns, because this isn't a Summit unique problem. We all know that. But we need to go to the state legislators and ask for help. We need to get them to make better policies so that we can deter criminal behavior. Last, I want to echo something that Bob said, which is we need more police presence. I think our police officers, by the way, our police department is phenomenal. We're very, very lucky. I have a lot of relationships with our current officers. But I think regular traffic stops do deter bad actors, and we need to make sure that we have the ability to be present around town.
So before coming to Summit, I had been robbed twice and burgled once. So I understand the fear that people have when they feel as if they don't feel secure in their homes or when they're walking. And as mayor, you're also the police commissioner. And so you have a responsibility for having daily conferences with the police chief. While I was on council, I made sure that we funded our police department as they asked. And that's why I think at the end of my term, I received a commendation for the police department for my unwavering support of them. But with respect to how we deal with crime and those issues, we need to be innovative in our thinking. And we need to look at technology leveraging with our police officers, who I agree are fantastic. We have now, the council that's currently in place has put in what's called automated license plate readers. They're in every single police car, And soon they will be all around in fixed locations around town. The key about that is the fact that what it does is it pings the police department when there is a car that's coming in that's been stolen and comes into Summit. And therefore, it gives the officers a reason for stopping that car. The police department has told us that most crimes are committed by people coming in with stolen vehicles. And this is a great way to prevent crimes rather than trying to address it afterwards. And finally, I would agree that we need to make sure that we work collaboratively. This is not a just a Summit issue, but it's not just a national issue, but certainly a regional issue, and we need to work together. Thank you.
I keep hitting the button. All right, so we keep being told that the crime is down. That may be the case in terms of numbers, but my concern is the nature of the crimes. The kidnapping, the shooting, the break-ins, in the middle of the night when our children are sleeping. It bothers me. I have 2 children. I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. What if I'm asleep? What if they're asleep and someone breaks into our home? That's scary. My opponent, in December of 2022, introduced the idea of a trespassing ordinance, but then decided to take it off the table. I'd like to understand why that was taken off the table when it could certainly act as a deterrent. Is it going to completely stop it? Probably not, but it certainly has helped other towns as a deterrent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Safety is my #1 priority. Let's start where we all agree. No one deserves to be the victim of a crime. While completed auto theft numbers are down, a successfully completed theft of a motor vehicle is down. I cannot say the same for attempts. I believe that those attempts are just as frightening and harmful and can be traumatizing for people when they happen. So I believe that we as a government should empower our police with the tools they need to continue the success with decreased motor vehicle thefts, but to cut down on these attempts. Mr. Naidu commented already on the license plate reader system, so I won't elaborate much further, except to say, in our leanest capital budget year in 15 years, we made a huge investment in our safety infrastructure by way of a license plate reader system. Once fully installed by next year, we'll create a seamless perimeter around our community, letting us know anytime a stolen motor vehicle enters or exits. Almost invariably, people who come in with the intention of trying to steal a car do so in a motor vehicle. And if they enter in a stolen motor vehicle. So once they enter in a stolen car, they're already doing something wrong. The police can apprehend them and act right away before they have a chance to make an attempt.
So this is my wheelhouse here. So, listen, I've been on task force, undercover narcotics, from Essex County to Hudson County to Camden County. Summit is a safe town, let me tell you. It really is. However, we have to be innovative. And when you think of innovation, what about Class 2 officers? So that will allow us to have a task force here in Summit that can work with our county prosecutor's office. Because now our county is responsible for quality of life issues. And one of those issues is crime, right? Now that gives the detectives or that new task force experience, maybe younger police officers, right? And also we need to bring back our auxiliary police because we can also add the police presence and deal with pedestrian safety. Now, when you think about the Class 2 officers, we don't have to pay them pensions, right? You know, they're part-time officers. They're sworn in when they're on duty, and when they're off duty, they have to return their firearm and they're regular civilians. But that gives us the leverage of police presence, right? We have to attack crime and stop playing defense all the time. And the last thing with the license plate readers, most of the folks that go out and commit crimes, these are organized crime units. There's not one individual that wakes up one morning and says, hey, I want to go steal a car. What they do is they switch license plates. I'm almost done. They'll switch license plates, so a lot of times you can't even pick it up. So I would say with the license plate readers, we take it to the next level. And
Thank you. Your time is up, sir.
thank you.
There are 18 roads to enter and leave Summit. In a perfect world, some of us here would like to have a police officer at each of those 18 entrances and exits 24/7. That's not possible. ALPRs, the automatic license plate readers, may not be perfect, but they're a whole lot better than trying to have human beings at each entrance and exit around the clock. So yes, I applaud Dr. Levine for getting that through. Although there are, I believe, 4 in place right now, so we've got a ways to go. They've made their presence felt. The police have, in fact, prevented a number of potential auto thefts. And I'll just speak briefly about the trespass ordinance. My understanding is that many of the individuals who are actually the bottom of the crime rings stealing these cars are 16 and 17-year-old juveniles. As the parent of a former 16 and 17-year-old boy, changing the laws, imposing stiffer penalties is not going to change his behavior because he has no concept of the consequences of his actions. So simply adding more laws to the books isn't going to change the result. What we need is creative ideas like the license plate readers. Thank you.
Thank you to each of the candidates. Now, an opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal by a show of hands. Would any care to rebut what was said? Let's start with you, sir.
Well, I respect Claire's comments about 15 and 16-year-olds. The reality is 15 and 16-year-olds out there are some of the most dangerous criminals. They are the ones that are going out there committing a lot of the crimes. They have guns, they're involved in drugs. These are organized activities, right? And the license plate readers in itself are not going to be solving crimes. We have to take it to another level and use machine learning as well to look for suspicious activity.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Dr. Levine.
Thank you. I just want to clarify something that my opponent said. In December, as a brand new council member, I so proudly shared an idea that I had about a topic that was on everyone's mind, but not really being talked about on the dais. And what I wanted to correct is it was not a trespass ordinance. What it was is the concept of a car theft ordinance, a fine for someone making an attempt at lifting a door handle. What happened was about 2 weeks later, when our governing body was reorganized, I was swiftly moved off this committee and unable to continue the due diligence process on it.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals, Mr. Pawlowski? I know that you had your hand up.
So technology is great. We can absolutely do more with less these days, but when it comes to modifying bad behavior, there's just no substitute for boots on the ground. When it comes to the trespassing ordinance, it can be whatever we want. There's no rule that says it can only be if you try to lift the door handle. The ordinance that I have been pitching when I go to council meetings is if someone tries to commit a crime on private property, they can get a ticket. They can get fined. They can pay the ticket, in which case we get money. They can come in. If they're juveniles, we can give them community service with an element of mentoring to maybe help them get a leg up.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Small.
Let's hope. There we go. Thank you. So yeah, there is absolutely one thing that we can certainly agree on, in the fact that that is safety is our number one concern. But when you're introducing the idea of a trespassing ordinance, it's the idea of introducing the ordinance so that we could try and put this in place. Having that ordinance in place definitely acts as a deterrent for people walking on a property to potentially stealing a car. We do have an ordinance in place, and one of the things that you had mentioned in your comments is the potential misuse of this ordinance, and I'd like to get an understanding of what she meant by having it being misused.
Your time is up, sir. Thank you. Any other responses? Thank you. Okay, so our next question will go to the mayoral candidates. It will be asked by Mr. Masiosi, and the initial response will be by Dr. Fagan.
Summit is rather unique in having a mayor-appointed school board. What would you look for in a school board candidate? What involvement should a board member have in the curriculum?
Thank you. It's an excellent question. So I've been on a lot of boards, and I've invited a lot of people to join boards, and the starting point is know what the mission of the board is, and then find a way to enhance what exists already and replace the people that are rolling off with people that have similar skills or better skills and can add to what exists already. So for instance, for the Board of Education, we need people that have knowledge of education. We need people that have knowledge of finances. We need people that understand, that represent everyone in this community, every area, geographically, socioeconomically. So we make sure, as I would evaluate candidates, I would want to make sure that we had diversity of thought, diversity of professional experience, diversity of socioeconomic background, diversity of geographic location. I think that's pretty simple. And also, I want to make sure that they're going to act consistently with the mission of the board, which is to provide an education that is equitable, financially responsible, and free of political influence.
So thank you for the question. This, I think, is probably the most significant power that the mayor has. Out of nearly 600 school districts in New Jersey, less than 15 give this power to the mayor. There is no council oversight, there is no public input, there is no criteria on which person gets selected to be on the school board. I have been involved in appointing people and creating boards. I created a board with respect to the Summit Conservancy. I looked for the skill sets necessary that would help to build the free market building. I'm currently the co-chair of the Great Swamp Watershed Association, and I've interviewed people to join that board. In looking for a board for the school board, I would look for educators. I would look for people who have specific substantive knowledge, including for issues that are relevant to our kids, such as social media and mental health. And I would look for people who serve in the different elementary school districts that we have. But this is also one of the areas that I want to talk about, listening to our educators and the importance of the mayor deferring to our educators in that process. And this is the distinction between myself and my opponent with respect to full-day kindergarten back in 2018 and 2019, when she opposed it, and she did not listen to the educators, she did not listen to the parents, she did not listen to the superintendent, she did not listen to the board, and instead, she decided to take a different position. And so when you're giving this power to the mayor, you have to trust their judgment that they will listen to the educators.
Dr. Fagan, do you care to have a 30-second rebuttal?
Yes, please. I asked questions as a resident and as a parent. I asked about financial feasibility, and I asked about the necessity of full-day kindergarten and the appropriateness for it for every student and every child. I have 4 kids. They're all different, and 2 of them could never have made it through a full day. So they would have been reclassed and been very old for their grade. I didn't think that was necessarily a great thing. However, full-day kindergarten has been here for 5 years. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So I will not address this again.
I agree that full-day kindergarten is here to stay. It would be absolutely political suicide to say that it's going to go away. I know this because every time I talk to parents who have kids who have gone through the last 4 years of full-day kindergarten, they've said how incredible that program has been for their kids. What I will say is the next issue, again, you have to trust one of us to appoint the school board. That's what it comes down to. And you can decide who that is on this issue, who will actually listen to the educators.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Jordan Glatt, and it involves all 8 candidates. And in this case, we'll start with Mr. Boyer, and we'll work in this direction, and then back around to Ms. Toth.
Summit's municipal debt has risen significantly at a time when interest rates are also rising, and debt service is one of the largest lines in the city budget. Do you see the current level of municipal debt as a problem? And if so, what would you do to address the problem?
It's a great question, thank you. And absolutely I do. But if we back up and say, well, why is the current debt situation the way it is? Well, the cart came before the horse when we talk about Broad Street West and our 2 fire departments. Well, initially, it was supposed to cost $11 million, and now it's 17. Well, that's one debt problem right there. We purchased a building on Cedar Street for how much? $1.5 million. Well, that's another debt problem right there. And we lost how many parking spaces that generated $400,000 annually? So we can see the pattern of why we have a debt problem. And the pattern is bad decisions. Well, the one good thing is that we hopefully don't have Broad Street West, and I hope they remove the area redevelopment, because if you look at Chatham, if you look at Springfield, and you look at Milburn, they have huge complexes there and no way to get to their job. They have to come to Summit to use the train. So what I would do is I look at our current situation and see how we can leverage that. And thank goodness we didn't go down that route. And if elected, I definitely would not do a Broad Street West. Thank you.
Thank you. First, let's take a look at our budget for a second. 50% of our tax dollar goes to our schools. 30% goes to the County of Union. It used to be 20%, but now it's 30%. Well, I can use another 90 seconds to talk about that. And the rest, the smallest piece of that pie, is all the money that we have to run our municipal government. And I'm proud of the high level of government services we are able to deliver with that small piece of the pie. I've learned a lot about our capital budget since I became chair of the Capital Projects Council Committee. This year, I'm proud to say that we delivered the leanest capital budget in the past 15 years. One reason the debt service are at levels it's at now is because that capital budget wasn't at these levels for a period of time in the past. We need to be as a municipality, making smart investments, balance the debt that we take on as a result. I'm proud of our capital budget this year because it's projects that really reflect our values in the city. For example, investments in our safety infrastructure, in Department of Community Programs and Parks, and other things like that. Other ways we can make responsible financial decisions is relying more heavily on grants, which is something that I'm always a strong proponent of here. Thank you.
I don't know what it is. Your question is spot on. We have an accelerated debt service. And then one of the things that I would probably want to take a look at is, what is our debt service? How are we going to fix an accelerated debt service in a rising interest rate environment? And we don't know if that interest rate is going to keep rising higher, because if we're borrowing $30 million at 5%, it's a lot different than borrowing $30 million at 2%. We need to pay down that debt service as quickly as possible. We need to try and figure out how are we going to generate some revenue. Maybe we should have really thought about, before taking away $400,000 in revenue in parking spaces, before we figured out a way to pay for it. We need to look at our budget from a 30,000-foot view and then drill down into it to see where we can cut some costs. There are other areas that, as far as I'm concerned, or have never heard of, is why aren't we taking a look at alternative energy? We have plenty of municipal buildings that we could potentially put solar panels on and reduce our energy cost. Some buildings up to $100,000 a year. Have we ever taken a look at that? If so, I would like to see that. There are plenty of ways that we can manage costs, reduce our debt, and get back to the place where it's a lot more manageable for our town.
Thank you. Just to answer Kevin's question, yes, we did look at putting solar paneling on municipal buildings, and if you talk to people from the Environmental Commission, they could go through a long list of the reasons why it can and cannot be done. But there is, people have looked at that really for a long time. We also have to understand how municipal debt works and debt servicing work. It isn't that you just take the debt immediately. Debt over time accumulates. And a lot of the debt servicing that we're doing is debt that has accumulated over a period of time. With respect to trying to deal with the debt going forward, I think we do have consensus here that something is going to happen in the area around the fire station. And yes, we're going to be able to sell that building. Those folks who are arguing there should be affordable housing only, actually, that will exacerbate the problem of having the debt servicing, because if you have a mixed-use development, that will help bring in revenue. And that will be the same case with respect to the building that was purchased. So really, there are avenues to go that will help to reduce our debt servicing going further. But let's broaden the discussion to really just talk about the budget more generally. And the fact is that, yes, we need to look at shared services. One of the things when I was on council we did was to collaborate with New Providence as far as the court, and that helps to reduce shared services. The other thing to do is to look at grant money and to go out there. We got money for the park line, $250,000 from the federal government to help to fund that project. And so there's ways of looking at trying to increase the pot from different avenues.
I'm not a financial genius by any stretch. You can ask my husband about that. But yes, debt is a problem. We do have a $17 million firehouse that's being built, and we have a $37 million bond for our schools. And those things happened in the last couple of years. We're going to need to address them, or we're all going to have to leave Summit before 40 years from now. I think that my understanding is Bristol Myers Squibb, because they've done a bunch of construction recently, will be reassessed, and that should help offset some of our issues here. Hopefully that will look like a nice number, I think, by the end of this year. The Kenview, or formerly Celgene, and it's been through a lot of turnover, but Kenview, the J&J property that's down behind the community center, is on the zoning board to do some construction there. We'll see what that looks like. It looks like they're going to tear some structures down, but it sounds to me like that might be a place where we could actually have some increase in our tax revenue as well. And then, listen, there's a lot of smart people in our town. I'm sure there are a lot of ideas out there, and so let's talk about them, and let's find a way to increase some revenue for our city.
So let's keep things into proper perspective. We are one municipality, we are part of the 8% of municipalities in New Jersey that has a AAA rating from all credit rating agencies. That is pretty good. We do not have a debt problem. Yes, our debt service costs have increased as interest rates have increased, But when we issue debt 30 bips above treasuries. Even when we issued 27-year bonds to pay for the firehouse, we issued at 30 bips above treasuries. And by the way, the bonds were for $15 million, and that's what the firehouse is costing. Now, I have, as I said, professional experience in how one takes bureaucracies and puts them to operate more efficiently. And importantly, I'm actually have done quite a bit of work in making sure we do that by rearranging jobs rather than by getting people out of work, because everybody knows that it's very, very difficult to restructure a municipality by the same way you'd restructure a corporate. So I would leverage that experience. I would seek grants. I would seek ways to increase ratables. And I have done this. I have looked into my clients' finances. I've managed P&Ls. I have always come in increasing costs and decreasing costs while increasing revenues. Sorry. Thank you.
So if we don't have a debt problem, we definitely have a debt servicing problem. When you look at the percentage of our budget that we are putting towards our debt as compared to other surrounding towns, and at the same time compare the percentage of our budget that's going to safety compared to surrounding towns, it's out of whack. We're spending more on debt than they are. They're spending more on safety than we are. And this year's budget, we dropped the police budget by $300,000. Now, that was because we had 3 higher-ranking officers retire, and we replaced them with 3 lower-ranking officers, leaving a delta of $300,000. But our own police chief said at a recent council meeting that the reason we're not enforcing traffic laws in this town is because we're busy and preoccupied with car thefts and burglaries. So the way I see it is we had a choice, okay? With these retirements, we could have gotten the exact same level of police service and safety services that we were getting for $300,000 less, or we could have got more services for the same amount of money that we would have had to pay had those 3 individuals not retired. I would have chosen more services, especially since we all know that we need them. Why we didn't is a mystery to me.
And Ms. Toth.
Oh. Well, let's go back to the actual question about debt service. I would say it is not a crisis. It is a concern. We do have a AAA debt rating, and we were lucky, certainly with the firehouse, that when we issued that debt, it was at very, very low interest rates. We have a 40-year term on it. I think on a going forward basis, what we need to every year we are going to pay off some of our debt. We're paying down principal as we go along, and the trick is to balance the principal we're paying off and reducing our debt load with what additional debt we may be taking on, consistent with our taxes and other revenues. And thank you, Elizabeth, for pointing out the increase in the ratables coming down the road, and David for the grant money, the infrastructure money that is becoming available to us. In recent years, the debt that the city has been incurred has been for stuff we can all point to. This building, the new firehouse. Much of the debt that that the city is paying off now, its purpose is lost in the mists of time. There is no structure people can point to say that a former council built that. Going forward, we need to be much clearer about why we're taking on debt and make sure that it is an investment and not just a way to pave some more streets. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, by a show of hands, would any of the candidates wish to give a 30-second response? We'll start with you, sir, Mr. Rook.
So, of course, a 1-year variance in a budget does not mean that one should commit to 20 years of paying a salary. And the reality is that we do not have a debt problem, but we do have to start worrying about how we manage our obvious liabilities, but also our pension liabilities and things that we do not really see on our balance sheet, to make sure that we remain AAA rated from all three agencies for the remainder of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nadeau.
Thank you. I would like to just say something. During these types of debates, and I've done now a couple of them, we focus on the negative of our town. And actually, I want to compliment my opponent, Elizabeth, for pointing out something very positive. Large corporations are not going to be investing in a town that is not well managed. When Bristol Myers Squibb invests millions and millions of dollars in this town in reconstructing the West Celgene campus, that's signaling that they believe in this town. When J&J puts their spin-off into the East Celgene campus, they are putting dollars here.
Thank you, sir.
That
your
they
time
are
is
investing in this town. Thank you.
There was a hand up over here. We'll start with Mr. Smallwood and then you, sir.
Well, I'm glad that David did mention that solar has been included into, or has been presented to the Environmental Commission, because I do know that, and I understand that the municipalities don't necessarily get all of the state and federal tax credits. However, there are private companies that offer power purchasing agreements that will install and maintain these solar panels on our appropriate municipal buildings for 15 years without costing the city a dime, but simply reducing the cost of the energy. And I want to make sure that we take that into consideration by cutting some costs.
Thank you. Your time is up, sir. Mr. Boyer?
Just so I don't go negative, David, I will say that you're right in one point. We can leverage shared services. Since Springfield just added almost 900 units, and they're not increasing their infrastructure. No fire, no police, so there's opportunity there. But I will say that if we continue on this path of spending, then you're right. No company will invest in Summit. So we need people that's going to be fiscally responsible.
Thank you. Mr. Pulowski.
Just to be clear, when I suggested that we should have put that $300,000 or kept it with our police force, I didn't say that we needed to hire more cops. Okay? It can be used for overtime. It could be used for the part-time officers that Jamel discussed previously. It could be used for lots of things.
Thank you. Our next question will go to the mayoral candidates. It will be asked by Mr. Masiosi, and the first response will be by Dr. Fagan.
Recently, it seems, the homeless population in town has increased. What should the city's response be?
Thank you. I know this is top of mind. I've heard a lot about this recently. And I know that we have wonderful organizations here in Summit. We have Bridges, where I spent a couple of hours last week or so. And they have an amazing system there. Rich is a really incredible leader, and they do a terrific job of intake and having data and taking care of the data and making sure they know who they're serving and tracking the people they're serving so that they can get them the services that they need. It looks a lot and sounds a lot like what Bergen County did when they achieved zero homelessness. And they talk a lot about, Orlando talks a lot about making sure we have the data so that we can fix these people up, these folks up with the services that they need. So we as a city don't really have the resources to fix this problem. However, we do have some fantastic organizations, Bridges and Grace and Summit Warm Hearts and the Interfaith Council all work really well together. And actually want to compliment our current mayor, Nora, for working with these groups and having them work together to try to address the homelessness problem here in Summit. I do believe that living in a bus shelter is probably not what most people would choose to do. And I don't think it's compassionate for us to leave them there. So we need to reach our hands out and help them.
I think you'll find a lot of what I'll say is not that different, because I think a lot of us come at this the same way. I think we all agree that a bus shelter or a train station is not the same thing as a home and should not be treated as such. And that people should feel, who want to use a bus shelter or a train station, that that's where it is, and they should be able to use it. I also agree that with respect to the issue, it's a complicated one and a challenging one. We have seen a decrease in the number of homeless. We started off, I believe, earlier this year, around 60 or so people coming into town. We're down into the 20s. So progress has been made. Sometimes the progress, though, is hardest when you get to the less and less numbers, because the easier cases are dealt with as you go along. There are a lot of great organizations in town. And again, I also compliment the mayor, because she organized having all these organizations come together. We have a lot of volunteers, but we had to make sure that all coordinated in their effort. The key here is also the county and making sure we get the vouchers to help get permanent housing for these folks. And that is what is going to be central for a mayor to do, to have those relationships with the county in order to be able to make sure that people get the resources. With some people, the way the system works is the vouchers come from the county, so people coming from Essex or Hudson or somewhere else need to go back to those counties in order to get services, and we need to make sure that that all happens. And this is a complicated problem, but one, as a community, if we can get together, we can solve.
Thank you. Dr. Fagan, do you care to have any response to that?
Yes, I failed to mention one thing, which you alluded to, which is this town, if there's a town that can solve for this, I know, I have all the faith in the world, that the people in this community will come together to help and to create a solution that works for everybody.
Thank you. The next question will go to all 8 candidates. It will be asked by Jordan Glatt. And we'll begin this time with you, Mr. Hoyk, in terms of a response.
Pedestrian safety has become a major problem in Summit. A number of residents submitted questions on this issue, citing numerous intersections where it is a severe issue. What would you do to improve pedestrian safety?
Thank you, Jordan, for that question. I am the father of 3 small children. They're in 1st grade, 3rd grade, and 5th grade. They walk nearly a mile to get home from school. So this is actually very near and dear to my heart. And I agree with those posing the question. For me, traffic safety is perhaps the biggest problem that we face right now in Summit. And it has a number of components. There's a behavioral component, people just simply choosing to ignore traffic rules. There's also a design component. Some of our roads, the way they're designed, encourage people to drive too fast. We do need to start by doing the proper diagnosis in each problem point. And then we already have a strategy that our chief of police has put in place, which is called the 3E strategy: education, engineering, and enforcement. Where education means all the things that we do to remind people that there's kids around and they should drive carefully. Engineering means putting together lines, flashing beacons, speed humps, and all the engineering solutions that we can use to slow down traffic and to make people follow the rules. And then there's enforcement, and we have to step up enforcement. And one of the things that's going to be critical that our cops start issuing more tickets, and hopefully people will start driving the way they did before. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Fagan, could you go next, please?
This is also something that's top of mind. I have 4 kids that walk through town, and I walk my dog a lot through town as well. So it's very scary to cross streets in town if it's the middle of the day or pretty much any time. So one thing I think that we could do is look at sight lines. Maybe there's a sight line setback or a visibility. We can address visibility at intersections. to make it safer for people crossing the streets. I do agree that traffic stops are important. They slow people down. So we need to make sure that the people that are driving fast see people pulled over on the side of the road, they'll slow down. That saves the moms pushing strollers. I also believe that we should make sure that we are identifying more crosswalks. There are some locations throughout town that I believe should probably have crosswalks that don't. I would say Magic Fountain is a good example of where the kids cross to run to Washington School or Tatlock, and there's no crosswalk there, as my running mate mentioned. There are a lot of places we could identify for more crosswalks, and we can do speed humps, all of the engineering things, obviously, as well. But generally, also want to just remind everybody that we all need to pay attention when we're driving and slow down.
I've heard from so many residents, especially the folks who are new to town, on the importance of pedestrian safety. And when I was on council, one of the things that I was passionate about, because we did not have one in this town, a sidewalk master plan. And the reason for the importance of the sidewalk master plan is, for those of you who've lived here long enough know, there's some places that you have a sidewalk and then suddenly it ends. And so people then have no incentive to continue walking. And what we made sure through the sidewalk master plan was a connectivity through the town, that if you're going to put sidewalks, it would go straight through. And one of the things we did to help that is to say that homeowners would not have to pay 50% of the costs to get the sidewalk in. Among the other things that we worked on was to get four-way stop signs, and there have been so many that have put in since then. Flashing beacons. One just recently been put in at Baltusrol Road, which will make a huge difference, especially to those parents who are taking their kids to Jefferson School. But that is part of the issue, is engineering solutions, and ones that we have done in the last few years that have made a real concrete difference. The other thing, as Diego pointed out, is of course enforcement. And that is necessary, because sometimes regardless of all the engineering that you do, people decide that they want to speed through town. And that's not acceptable, because we do have a town that should be walkable and bikeable, and pedestrians should feel as if they can feel safe crossing this road. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smallwood.
So, I don't know about for any of you, whenever I see a police officer and I'm driving my car, the first thing I do is look at my speedometer. It's all about visibility. If we create our visibility of our police officers, in 2017, we won the award, or let me rephrase that. Chief Weck and his administration and our Summit Police Department won the 2017 Community Award in New Jersey. We used to have auxiliary police officers walking around town. They can help with the traffic flow. We had officers walking downtown. When you see a police officer, it typically deters people from doing what they may have wanted or intended to do. When we create that visibility and give the police officers the resources that they need to give us that safety net of that visibility, just knowing that they're there is going to help. And so having that traffic flow and watching, and again, we can't control what our surrounding towns do with their overdevelopment, but it will affect us. It will bring more traffic. It will bring more pedestrians to our downtown. And that's the reason why we need to give our officers and our police department the resources that they have to make sure that we have the visibility and to deter anyone who is going to break our laws.
Thank you. Dr. Levine.
Oh, it's nice standing up. Thank you. Pedestrian and traffic safety. So this year alone, we've conducted 19 traffic studies in residential neighborhoods. Born from these analyses, we have prioritized or already installed 12 of these rapid flashing pedestrian beacons, most of them along school routes. We've put in new stop signs all over the place. We've prioritized or have the grant money for about 5 sidewalk projects too. All of these endeavors are using engineering to make our roads safer for pedestrians and for drivers. So in Summit, there are 5 elementary schools, and the way the city is laid out is everyone should be able to walk to and from their elementary school. The distance shouldn't be that far for them. And that's true for most students, but not all. There's some parts of town where that's not the case. And those have been big priorities of mine since I've been chairing the Capital Projects Committee to make sure walk-to-school routes are accessible for kids. I think that is so important for us. I also want to make a comment that it's a different world as far as pedestrian and driver safety than it was even just a few years ago. The cars are bigger, they're more powerful. We are all, drivers and pedestrians, so much more distracted than ever before. Looking at phones, the way people, it's not only drivers, it's also people who are the pedestrians who are not paying attention. They're looking at their phone and they're not aware of their environment, and that's a really big problem as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Boyer.
Forgot I had my own mic here for a second. I tell you, if every year was an election year, we would get a lot done. There were some, if you look at Baltusrol, you look at Ashland, right? I talked to the residents. They said, man, I went to a council meeting, I put that in like 4 years ago. I'm glad we got it. I said, yeah, I'm glad too. So maybe we'll have it another election. But the fact is, do we need more police officers or don't we, right? I mean, I keep hearing the wishy-washy, going on. And we need to look at innovative ideas. And that's what I said. Class 2 officers don't have to pay them pensions, right? They can help out with enforcement. We looked at the idea of an auxiliary police force. I'm really concerned about crossing guards, right? There are some streets that we don't have crossing guards. If you move a couple of blocks away from the school, there's no crossing guards there. So that can really, really be helpful. But if you look at our main roads, Springfield Avenue, Ashwood Avenue, I was walking down, they're supposed to have some more stop signs. I almost got ran off the road. It said 25 miles an hour. I looked up, I thought it was 50, but I had to look up and confirm it was 25. So a lot of times, you can put as many flashing lights in as you want. You can paint it orange, the crosswalk, right? But without clear police presence, we're still going to have an issue. And by the way, we need to look at bike lanes. And the master plan called for that. Our kids have electric bikes. We need to look at that. That's a serious thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Toth.
Okay. The pandemic changed the way we use our city. There are more people in town, around town, throughout the day than there were 4 or 5 years ago. So it really does call for a change to traffic enforcement and pedestrian safety. I love the engineering we've done. And in my heart of hearts, I'm an infrastructure geek. This makes me really excited. When you look at other cities, both around the United States and sometimes in other countries, they've done some really interesting engineering things that I think it's worth taking a look at. Basically, we should be thinking outside the box with the engineering part of pedestrian safety in particular. I've seen serpentine roads in other places. I've seen places where the roads are deliberately narrow, go in and out, narrowed and widened, so that people are forced to slow down. And I think that's something that Summit should take a look at. You don't have to invest big dollars to put up traffic cones and bollards to try it out. Maybe it'll work. Less expensively, fog lines are fabulous. Those are the white lines that get painted on the sides of the road, makes them visually narrower. If there's not a sidewalk, it gives people a safer place to walk and is kind of an ad hoc bike lane. Traffic enforcement includes parking enforcement downtown, too.
Mr. Pawlowski.
So, whichever ones of us win this election, I think the 8 of us should start a pedestrian safety commission because these are all really great ideas. But again, when it comes to modifying people's behavior, there's no substitute for boots on the ground. Auxiliary police officers can direct traffic. Right? When we hear about pedestrians getting hit, it inevitably has something to do with traffic flow. Somebody speeding around an illegally parked car, or a pedestrian walking around a car that's illegally parked on a sidewalk, on a crosswalk. These are when these incidents occur. Some other ideas that weren't mentioned here are parabolic mirrors for blind spots. Diego, you know, you need one at your on Springfield Ave, right coming out of your house. Cars speed like crazy there. But a police presence will help to deter people from speeding, pulling people over, the enforcement aspect of it. We've also seen a lot of decoy police cars around town lately, and I think that they're designed out there to help with the car thefts, but we could also use them for speeding. I think we have 3 officers on our traffic unit. We used to have 5, and maybe we could get it back up to 5, but why not use some of these extra cars that we have parked in front of City Hall, station them around town, and sometimes there's a cop in there, right? So you got to stay on your toes. You know, it's not always going to be an empty police car. Thanks.
Thank you. Now an opportunity for any of the candidates to provide a 30-second rebuttal. If you care to, please raise your hand. Mr. Hoyt.
So everybody agrees that enforcement is really important. We have an arithmetic problem. We have 80-some odd miles of road, and we cannot have a police officer at every single step of those roads all the time. That's the reason why we need engineering solutions. Now, I have walked Park Avenue multiple times, and I'm going to use Park Avenue as an example, before and after it was repaved. I want to talk about the lines that were put on Park Avenue. The residents there appreciate how having those lines, the fog lines, as Claire calls them, and the parking lane, really slows people down because the road has been effectively narrowed.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up.
Sorry.
Any other responses? Mr. Boyer.
Yeah, I've been hearing the same thing over and over again about we can't have a police officer at every intersection. That's not how policing actually works. When you have a police presence, if there's a police officer or patrol car in the neighborhood, intuitively, people slow down. They've seen that car. Even if you're a couple of blocks away, you know that they're patrolling in the area. I mean, you're not just going to go and do 50 miles an hour. Police car just ran by you. So it's not about having a police at every corner. It's about the mere presence of them that deters that behavior.
Thank you. Mr. Belowski.
If we have an arithmetic problem, then we need to come up with some creative ways to increase our police presence. It can be done, like I said, with decoy cars. It can be done by adding patrols, giving our police even more money to use for overtime, auxiliary police, Class 2 officers. We need to get the presence up. If we don't need more police to do that, great. If we do, let's get the force what we need.
Thank you. Our next question will be asked by Frank Masiosi, and this is a mayoral question. And Dr. Fagan, you'll respond to this initially. This is it? This is the last question? Okay, and our panelists have done the math, and they recommend this will be the last question before candidates will have an opportunity for their closing remarks. Mr. Masiosi.
The closure of Maple Street for summer outdoor dining has been an issue. How would you handle this issue in the future?
First, I have to ask, am I the only one freezing in here? So cold. Maybe I didn't wear the right clothes. Anyway, so the closing of Maple is an issue in part because it wasn't done legally. I haven't met a single person that doesn't like to dine outdoors. I enjoy it. I seek places where I can eat outside. It's very nice. Brought the community together when the executive order by the governor permitted the closure of Maple Street. was very nice. It brought people in from other towns. It felt very social, very exciting. But what happened was that we didn't get the approval from NJDOT to legally close the road. And now, my understanding is that if we made a pedestrian walkway or pedestrian promenade, we could potentially get DOT approval, but it is an onerous process. So it would take a lot. It would take a lot of studies and a lot of money. I'm not opposed to it, but I do think that when we do things, we need to do them properly and legally, and we need to go through the process and get it right, because we don't want to expose our city to a liability. Thank you.
So the closure of Maple Street started during the pandemic, and we started that as part of an innovative strategies to make sure we had a surviving downtown. And we do, and we have a great thriving downtown now. And the atmosphere that created, both for the community as well as for people who are coming from outside the community, was great. And I've been told by so many residents when I go walking and talking that they have missed that atmosphere. One resident said to me, you know, when I was driving on a Friday or Saturday night down DeForest, and I'd hear that music and I would hear all that voices, I would say, wow, I should just stop and see what's going on, because I'll run into people. And so I'm in favor, let me just make my position clear, I'm in favor of seasonal closure of Maple Street. I think that it's important for our downtown to have a thriving downtown. We have less than 1% first floor vacancy. When I first ran for council, we had 15 first floor vacancies. That's a big difference. This other thing is with regard to approval. Millburn right now has a closure of Maple Street during the summertime. It can be done. It's just a matter of filing the right forms and getting it done. I don't think there's any legal risks and liabilities associated with it. Other towns do it. If they can do it, certainly we can do it. And I think it'll improve our downtown. Our businesses that are around will be benefited from it, because they have a lot of more customers going and seeing what's available.
Thank you. Dr. Fagan, do you care to provide a 30-second response?
This is what Summit neighbors do. They take care of their neighbors. Thank you, Diego. Yes, I do believe that it would be nice to do, but it is a major artery. Maple Street is a major artery that goes through town. It's one of 2 cross-town streets. So perhaps we could consider doing something like this on Beechwood, because in Millburn, that piece of road that they have closed is not, you can get around it pretty easily. But in Summit, Maple Street, closing Maple Street is a major traffic flow concern.
The road actually in Millburn is the road that is right by the paper mill playhouse and goes through literally the downtown of Millburn. So I think it's actually a busier street than what we're talking about Maple Street. The reason why Maple Street makes more sense is actually there are fewer parking spaces there, and there are 4 restaurants there. I believe the restaurants can share the space with the other store owners and with the community and have an open area. We recently had the fair this past weekend. There were so many different activities for kids there. Why can't we do that during the summertime? We'd have some activities for the kids, and people could sit there and enjoy themselves.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We've now reached the end of our debate process, and the candidates will each have 2 minutes to provide a closing statement. The order in which they will proceed was selected at random, and we will begin with Mr. Boyer.
I went first, I went last, now I go first. Here we go. Not a lot of time to debate. I wish I had more time to debate tonight so I could articulate more of what I want to do. But the fact is, diversity of thought in the council is good. You know, I'm the only one up here that has law enforcement experience. I think we need to take a comprehensive look at how we are dealing with organized crime. Again, these are not individuals that just wake up and decide to come and steal. These are individuals that are involved in organized crime. So we can put a detective unit out there to work with our county prosecutor's office, which is responsible for quality of life issues, bring class 2s in to help us with pedestrian safety and traffic laws and auxiliary police. I think we can have a good handle on that and incorporate our license plate readers. It's not the end to be all. But we also need a diversity pipeline into leadership. I found that in East Summit, in our areas of Weaver Street and Glenwood, their voices are not being heard. There's no pathway to leadership to involve them in our city government. We need to have that happen. Tackling the homeless. By the way, I went to the bus stop. I talked to each and every one of those individuals. I drove with one of them to the hotel to get him in there. The fact is, as a council person, there are times when you need to be boots on the ground. There's time where you need to do the hard work, as opposed to staying on the dais and pointing fingers. We need to do the work. My last thought is, I have 2 decades in investigative insight. A lot of that is working with people, understanding people. And that is the cornerstone of what you need from a council person. You need a council person that can relate to your entire town. So whether that is from Dennis Place to Blackburn to East Summit, I'm the person that can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate will be Kevin Smallwood.
I moved here 20 years ago. Like many of you from New York City, Hoboken, and Jersey City. We moved here because we fell in love with the tree-lined streets, our beautiful downtown, and the unique shops and wonderful restaurants that we all attend. We can't control what our surrounding towns do. We can't control their overdevelopment, but their overdevelopment will affect us with their vehicle traffic and pedestrian traffic. But we can certainly control what we do here with how we develop and progress our charming suburban town we call home. I've heard tonight Broad Street West is done. It's not done. Not until the blighted designation has been removed. But we need elected officials that will stand up to represent us, not the national developers and consultants, so that they can line their pockets and not pay their fair share of taxes for at least 30 years. We do not need blighted designations here in Summit. We do not need to give tax abatements to national developers to help us continue the vibrance and success of Summit and retain the historic character and natural assets of our town. We need elected officials that will represent Summit taxpayers, not national developers. And I can only speak for myself and my running mates. We are not politicians seeking higher office. We're parents, we're coaches, and we're neighbors, seeking to represent you, parents, coaches, and neighbors. If I'm lucky enough to earn your vote, I will continue to do that and represent you.
Mr. Nadeau.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming here, spending the evening with us. Thank you all for listening, and thank you for all those of you in television land who will be listening to us speak. So it's been my great honor and privilege to serve this community in the way that I've been able to do so. It is only because of my love for Summit that I do what I do. This city is more complicated than one can imagine. We've had a few minutes here really to talk about the complicated issues of the city. We have 22,000 residents. We have more than $3.2 billion in property value. 15% of our kids are on free and reduced lunch. 6% of our population lives below the poverty line. We have 2 major corporate campuses, we have a regional hospital, and we have more than 80 miles of roadway. That's a lot. But this city is more than facts and figures. In answering tonight's questions, I hope you heard me talk about people, because government decisions affect each of us and each of our lives. That's why I talk about full-day kindergarten, because it has made such a positive impact on so many families. And I know this because they've told me so. If my opponent's position had prevailed, these families would not have benefited. I've talked about our first responders and the challenges they face, and the need to give them the appropriate tools to get the job done and to keep us safe. In electing a mayor, you are trusting one of us with choosing the school board. We are only one of less than 15 school districts in the entire state out of 600. The mayor also serves on the Board of School Estimate, and therefore is only one of 5 votes on the school budget, and through it all the priorities of the school district. I believe I have the requisite qualifications to be able to find the right school board in the future. Finally, in electing a mayor, you're electing the chief spokesperson for the town. And as a lawyer, and specifically as a litigator, I think I can advocate for all of us. I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Fagan is next.
I am a Republican, but that doesn't define me. I am my own person, and I think independently. The label is not important. I have the support and encouragement of registered Democrats, Republicans, and independents. So if you want to label me, look at me as someone who loves Summit and just wants to make it better. At the beginning of the evening, I asked you to consider the following. How do you feel about the trends in safety, education, and the character of our town? How do you want Summit to look and feel in 5 years? And which candidate can bring about healing for Summit by being available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, meeting with you, walking in town? Let's review. On my opponent's watch, crime is up. The mayor appoints the chief of police. You'll find me walking downtown with the chief and our best-in-class Summit Police Department. Presence is key. On my opponent's watch, our school rankings have dropped. Preparing your children for the best life possible, we must have a school system that ascends into the upper echelons of rankings. On my opponent's watch, and at his urging and direction, Summit narrowly missed having an enormous building in the middle of town, which would have strained our infrastructure and drastically changed the charm of our downtown. We need to work together to preserve our quaint downtown and support our local businesses. On my opponent's watch, public trust has eroded. We need to get back to citizen-centric governing. Let's have quarterly meetings right here in the community center to bring you into the conversation. And as I did with my medical practice, I'll make house calls. I have heard that many of you are concerned about these trends, and I want to lead the town in a better direction. As a doctor, I have the ability to listen and process and empathize to all points of view. As your mayor, I will listen, not dictate. Together, we can build a Summit that is safe, prosperous, and inclusive for all. I'm committed to this vision. I hope you will entrust me with the opportunity to lead and serve as your full-time mayor. Remember, I'm retired. I humbly request your vote. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Frank and Jordan and Chris, and thank you, HTTV.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Pulaski.
My opponent often touts his scientific knowledge and education from some impressive institutions. But when it comes to our hometown, I'll take an ounce of common sense over a pound of scientific knowledge any day of the week. I learned the importance of common sense from Hilltopper legends at some impressive institutions right here in Summit, from Jerry Murphy at Lincoln School, and from Lawton C. Johnson himself at the junior high, and perhaps most of all from Art Cottrell at Summit High School. And then there's my motivation. I love this town and I'm here to stay. I'm running for council to help Summit accomplish things we actually want and need, not to sit on a dais or to virtue signal, and not to garner praise or credit. Giving back to my hometown is the greatest possible reward. I want to work for all of you, and I will work. I'll work to improve our police presence for a safer Summit where peace of mind abounds. I'll work to bring back trust in our local government through truth, transparency, and open discussion at the beginning of council meetings. You won't hear we've got business to get to when a citizen wants to talk. My business on this council will be the concerns of Hill citizens, even if that means I have to stay up until midnight every couple of weeks. I'll work to get Summit back to a colorblind community where we see each other not as red and blue, but maroon and gold. I especially want to work on the 2026 Master Plan revision. It's critical to Summit's future. Overdevelopment is closing in from every direction. Chatham and Milburn, Westfield and Springfield, we can't stop them from blighting every square mile, every square foot within their borders if that's what they want to do, but not in Summit. And we don't bastardize the rules to impress folks in Trenton and DC, and we sure as heck don't have to respect any builders who are looking out for themselves and not us. Guy Hazelman has been saying for decades that Summit is the best little city in America. My opponent borrowed this adage for his campaign, and on that we agree. It's up to all of you, though, the voters, to decide who's best suited to keep Summit at its very best. My name's Bob Pulowski. It would be my honor to earn your vote for Common Council in Ward 1.
Thank you. Next up, Claire Toth.
Well, thank you all for spending your evening with us. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm the only candidate here who combines downtown business experience, deep nonprofit experience, and substantial city commission experience. I already have a track record of proven leadership in Summit with a history of significant accomplishments. This experience will allow me to hit the ground running. Throughout this campaign, I've put forward specific proposals on which I'd focus on council, from city finances to traffic control and pedestrian safety to smart development. You'll hear more in coming weeks. If elected, I will bring decades of experience to council. I'll continue to work hard for all of Summit. I have the skills to facilitate creative solutions for our biggest challenges. You all know how important this election is. You're here this evening. Summit's success depends upon proven leadership, and it would be my honor to lead Summit into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Diego Hoyk.
Thank you, Chris, Frank, Jordan. Excellent job running this forum. I want to thank everybody who submitted a question and everybody who's watching in person or on TV. I believe we can reach incredible heights if we're able to discuss issues as neighbors. Let us model for our children what it means to be good neighbors. That good neighbors are assertive but respectful. As good neighbors, let's strive to protect our community relations when we solve our problems. I have shown that I focus on solving problems and that I base my decisions on sound analysis and hard data. I do not live in constant grievance or engage in ad hominem attacks. So in that sense, voters are able to choose between two very different visions of what it means to represent Ward 1 on Common Council. I am the father of 3 young children. I'm an immigrant who has benefited from our country's incredible education system and someone who has paid back this trust by providing solutions that have improved people's lives. I am a small business owner who knows how to solve problems, and I want to give back to our community. My work experience has prepared me well for serving on council. I've been an innovator, a general manager, and I have served on corporate boards. I've been able to add value in these diverse roles because of my ability to solve problems. I work with key stakeholders, I listen to all sides to find the most effective way to leverage available resources. Governing a city like Summit requires these important skills. I look forward to serving my community by representing my neighbors on the Summit Common Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, Dr. Jamie Levine.
Thank you. Government is here to help people and make people's lives better. That is why I serve and what drives me to seek a full term. Thanks to everyone for coming and submitting such wonderful questions. Whether we agree on everything or not, I hope you had a chance to see and note my focus, my ability to work well with everyone, and the fact that I'm not afraid to speak my mind constructively, always with the guiding principle that government exists to make our lives better. I'd like to close with a brief story that tells how much I love doing this job for all of us. The other morning over breakfast with my children, I was simultaneously preparing for a committee meeting that was to be just after I dropped them off at school. I was reviewing a proposal for an installation of a piece of art called a sound column, which is a sculpture at the base, where at the base is a xylophone, where passersby can pick up a mallet that's attached on the bottom and make music. My children looked up at me and they were commenting on the beauty of this multi-sensory piece of art, and the admiration in their eyes told me that they knew their mom was doing something pretty cool on council. And at that moment, I felt really proud of the work that we're doing here. Thank you for listening and getting to know me. It would be an honor to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes tonight's forum. My special thanks to our distinguished panelists, Hometown TV, our timekeeper, and I'd ask that you again join me in a round of applause for the candidates.